and to Luxembourg, has agreed to share a couple of minutes with us, commenting upon Mongolia, for which he has a deep affection. And Ambassador Gould will then introduce Ambassador Bold, our guest for the evening. We'll have one small thing for you to be patient with, and that is before Ambassador Gould begins his presentation here, there'll be a moment's pause while the lights are dimmed. And then before he introduces the ambassador, after the presentation, there'll be another turning back on of the lights. So we'll have two pauses, and please be patient with those. Ambassador Gould.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Bold, fellow members. It was my good fortune and that of my family to make a remarkable tour of Mongolia about 4 years ago. And because I assume that not all of you are totally familiar with Mongolia, I thought you might enjoy this little brief summary from a touristy point of view of Mongolia that reflects a couple of pictures from the National Geo, for which I'm indebted, and photos that we took ourselves. As you can see, the western part of the country has only two neighbors, Russia on the west and on the north, China on the east and on the south. These are the Altai Mountains, which are very cold and very high in the west, very rugged winter. In the south, the Gobi Desert, which has its own beauty. Here was a little boy we saw riding up to us on a camel, and Mongolian children ride everything. He managed that camel, and he was about 6 years old. We climbed the dunes and then ran down the dunes, which you can see were quite high. There's a great serenity to the Gobi. In the central rolling plains that extend 1,500 miles across, every type of domesticated animal can be seen. Horses and excellent riders, yaks, these are some yaks being milked, sheep, another type of herd. And the antique means of transportation are still in effect, including the Russian bus that we traveled about in. In the central area are beautiful rivers where we found lots of fish and friendly people. You see that everywhere you look, there are animals. And the remarkable fact is that from the 1,500 miles, there are no barriers, no fences, no walls. It's completely open space. This is the erection of a gur, and here they're making the felt that goes around the gur, the inside of a gur, and fancy gurs for tourists. Of course, there are high rises in the big cities, and the gurs are urbanized, as you can see here, even in the cities themselves. The past is always present in Mongolia, and there are numerous religious edifices Still today, even though the Russians who occupied Mongolia from about 1922 until the late 1980s destroyed all but 3 of the great monasteries that existed in Mongolia. 700, only 3 remained after the Russians left. The interiors of the religious buildings are fantastically decorated, as you can see here. And this is the outside of Karakoram. Now I turn to the Nadam. This is a great festival that takes place for the 3 major sports: archery, wrestling, and horseback riding. This is the end of a 35-kilometer race. And in the country, as well as in the great city of Ulaanbaatar, you have the Nadam repeated there too in country festivals. And the people arrive in all manner and form of vehicles, in colorful costumes. And here is the race that we saw, the young people coming up at the end of the race and racing into the future of Mongolia. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you the ambassador from Mongolia to the United States, who was educated, among other places, at the Diplomatic Military School in Moscow, at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, who has served here in the United States since February 2003. Previously, he's been a staff officer at the Ministry of Defense. He has been for 5 years in Japan. He was secretary and director of the Institute for Strategic Studies in Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia. And he was deputy director of the General Intelligence Agency of Mongolia. So it's with a great deal of pleasure I turn the microphone over to Ambassador Bold.
Good evening, the ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you so much for your nice introduction to Mr. Bird, the President of the Council. Also, thank you so much to the Ambassador Gold for the nice pictures you've taken in the Mongolia. And thank you so much finally to all of the audience taking time to come there just to share your views with me. Also, it's a great opportunity for me just to show up in the front of this serious audience, as I was told by the people. Because 2 years ago, I watched the History Channel, which showed serials called The Barbarians. They are the Vikings, the Goths, Huns, and finally Mongols. They mentioned the barbarian, no doubt think about tribe people clad in animal skins, the eating of the raw meat, and chopping off people's head. So they trampled the civilizations. So therefore, this good opportunity for me this time just to show up in the front of you with my suit. And thank you so much for this kind generosity. What is common between the United States and Mongolia? You just seen the horse. There was the hard time when people think of Mongolia. They bring in just two thinkings. First one is the Mongolia is the end of the world. Second is the Mongolia is the land of endless Gobi Desert. But I should say it's not true. As you have seen in the pictures, the land of Mongolia is the combination of the high mountains, the nice plateaus, the Gobi Desert, and endless steppes. So beauty, nature you can find in the Mongolia. Most important, Mongolia is not in the world. You can find that they're very friendly, nice people. Why the Mongolia are so nice and friendly? Sometimes even I ask myself. So short introduction, Mongolia. Mongolia is about the size of the Alaska. With small population, the population like in the state of Kentucky. It's very tiny nation. But Mongolia is the country with long and proud history. It's not so easy to survive between the two big civilizations after populations only 2.5 million. Still we ask ourselves, how the wise and smart were our residents make us still survived between the two big giants and civilizations. It's fine that still we take care to preserve first of all, our language and identity and territory, which make us today being the independent and nice, such friendly people. Yes, we're proud very much about history, but also we're proud very much about recent history. I mean the last 15 years history, which we are common still. Mongolia, they proved its last democratic constitution in the 1992, which is the fundamental guarantee of the democracy in the country still. We managed to establish the multi-party system in the country. According to the related laws, if you got the 800 supporters officially registered, you can establish your own political party. Today we have over 20 political parties in this tiny nation. Mongolia is the totally free country since 1994, according to the Freedom House, based in New York City, which is defining the world countries according to the different categories. Mongolia today is the open and the free and vibrant society. We're proud very much about this achievement. We already established the independent judiciary system, independent executive power, and legislative power in the country. The main government structure based on the parliament, which consists of the 76 members of the parliament, which is elected directly by the people based on the majority system. We have the executive power exercised by the cabinet, headed by the prime minister, and we have the president, nominated by the political parties, but elected directly by the people. So this people choice shows the Mongols like the check-in and the balancing system of the government. It's good. to check and maintain balance. Mongolian voters they used the ballot box to decide the political power in the last 15 years. Today, the change of government in Mongolia is just normal thing, just normal culture, because the policy will stay the same. It will not affect the policy and the fundamental principles of the democracy and freedom and policy guidance. Economy. Yes, we have a very small economy. The most painful transition from the centralized economy to the market-oriented economy is already over. The most painful transition period is already behind us. When we look back at transition period, we wondered how we overcome the painful period, how people tolerated these hardships and dark days. Today, the Mongolian economy based on the private sector-led economic growth. Already over 80% of the GDP belongs to the private sector. The most of the economy is privatized. Only energy sector left without privatization. But very soon it will be privatized. Economy is under recovery. During the 1990s, during this hard time, we tried to find the right way to manage our transition toward the market-oriented economy. At the time, we established very well-founded the legal environment to manage, to bring the market economy to the country. We launched the simultaneous political and economic reforms in the country, which is distinguished us from the two big giants which surround us. Because we should be somehow different from the two big giants. It's why that we choose these simultaneous reforms. So since the late of 1990s, economy just put in the right track, the recovering. And last few years we enjoy with high growth of the economy in the country. And last 3 years we enjoyed between the 7 and 10% of the annual growth in the country. Despite we understand the basis of this growth still is very narrow, we have to still restructure our economy. But most important, we survived and revived our identity, customs, and accomplished to establish our own values based on the universal democracy and freedom principles. We achieved to establish the well-guided and functioning democratic institutions in the country. Despite there are many challenges there. The most important value we got during the last over the decade is the freedom and democracy in the country. So Mongolia is no longer the end of the world. Mongolia is today the model of the democracy for the many developing countries. So the start is very good, but much more remains to be done. There are many difficult hardships and challenges ahead of us. We understand this too. So what challenge faces today Mongolia? First one is the poverty. Poverty is not declining. Today is already 1/3 of the population is below line of the poverty. When the people look at the official estimations and wondered, and asking the government why the Mongolia is rich in the mineral deposits, when the Mongolia has the great potential of the development, why the government still cannot manage to feed and dress the only 2.5 million population. Despite being proud of democracy and freedom, still the people ask the government and managers, where is the benefit of the democracy on the stomach of the people, on the stomach of the ordinary people in the street? Therefore, this question will be always challenge for the government and the leadership of Mongolia. And then how to boost the economic development based on the knowledge and the information technology, and how to shift the economic policy from the aid to the trade. Mongolia enjoys in the last decade receiving the large sum of the grant and development aid from the many countries. But now the age and the area of the receiving such grant and development aid should be ended. We have to change our economic policy to be the responsible and trade partner of all of the world. It's the second great challenge to face the Mongolia. In order to accomplish successfully this task, we understand we should be committed to the building of the good governance in the country. The president and the government and the parliament, all of them committed strongly and dedicated to strengthen the good governance in the Mongolia. At first glance, it not be difficult to bring the good governance to manage just 2.5 million people, but with vast territory. But in reality, there is the big gap between the perception and reality, because we need the cultural change to bring to the country. It's the next, the biggest challenge faced by the Mongolia. And most fair factor in Mongolia's history and history policy was and still is the isolation, or to be isolated from the outside world. If you do something wrong toward too big or two giants, next morning you will get more higher fee to send your goods, products to the outside world. Therefore, you should always please too big your giants. So the history of Mongolia is always how to please too big our giants. But there is no way. Therefore, the history of Mongolia is always in the search of the faith neighbor. I mentioned what is the common between the Mongolia and the United States. One of common distinct between the Mongolia and the United States. You have just two neighbors. We are two. If we change the position and title my presentation, the United States is the Mongolia's, the faith neighbor, opportunities and challenges. We understand it's not so easy also for you to have find a common language with the two tough neighbors. Therefore, always in the search of the good, the faith neighbor is the survival history and policy of the Mongolia, even today. Therefore, the above mentioned upcoming challenges will test Mongolia's democracy ahead. It will be a tough test, but we are already ready to overcome all of these challenges. In the past, this great geographical distance and the lack of information and absence of the knowledge made us, the United States, Mongolia, unknown each other for a long time. As I mentioned at first glance, there might be a thought, what is the common between us? But if you look at carefully, we count many similarities. Mongolia is the land with vast open spaces, not unlike some part of the United States. Its people are renowned of their skills as horsemen. The horses and frontier are also formidable elements in both American and Mongolia's development and helped shape their national characters. The Ambassador Cloud mentioned about the great explorer Roy Andrews, who traveled to Mongolia in the 1920s. He found that there are many similarities between American and Mongolian people. One of them is national character regarding the horses. The bad treat of horse and stealing of horses in Mongolia considered to be the worst crimes and to be punished to the death at the time in Mongolia. The same value we found in the Western America during this 19th centuries. Also, spirit of mutual assistance in the rural areas, some the common character between the Mongolia and the United States. Horse is the symbol of the happiness and the prosperity considered in the Mongolia. I think the same like in the United States. Look at my name, bold. Same meaning like in the English, steel and strong and bold. So we have even the same word which we use in our language. There are many historical contacts between us. The first missionaries who went to Mongolia in the 19th century, they are from this country. Today the mine is booming in Mongolia. At the time, in the late of 19th century, at the time the young engineer whose name is Mr. Hoover went to Mongolia. Later he became the president of the United States. And he engineered first the railway system in the Mongolia and dreamed to build up the railway from China up to the Mongolia. But he was refused by at the time both Russia and China, but later both used this drafted engineering system to build up this railway system in Mongolia. First electric light was introduced by the American in Mongolia. In the beginning of 20th century, the American people brought to the Mongolia the first electric plant and introduced to Mongolia. It's a very amazing story too. Also at the time, most of the wool supply United States got from the Mongolia through the China. In the beginning of 20th century, almost half of the wood supply came from Mongolia over the ocean to this country. We cannot find in the world such countries like the United States and Mongolia, which spend such long time to recognize each other and to establish diplomatic relations. And next year we will celebrate only the 20 years anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries. But we spent over the 60 years to recognize and to find common language between us. At least the two presidents from the Democrats, at least one president from the Republican failed to establish such official relations between the two countries, despite they promised during the election campaign, I will do it. President Kennedy is so popular among the Mongolians. Why? Because he, for the first time, they initiated to recognize Mongolia and to establish diplomatic relations. He was succeeded by the President Johnson, then succeeded by the President Nixon, then by the President Carter, but all of them failed. Why? Because of the China lobby. But President Reagan accomplished this task and established official relations only in 1987, which is we're going to celebrate 20 years anniversary in the next year. Also, the Baltimore is a very memorable place for the Mongols because Baltimore is the first place of the born of the Mongolian studies in this country. If you remember, there was the Page School of International Studies, it's the part of the Johns Hopkins University in the 1940s. The own Baltimore, they founded the first root of the Mongolian studies at this school in the late of 1940s. And he brought for the first time the Mongolian people to this land, in the Baltimore. But unfortunately, later the Mongolian studies was forced to move to the Indiana University because of this McCarthyism, something dark days. But still the Mongolian remember that Baltimore is the first place of the birth such distinguished studies initiated by the own Baltimore. So what the role we see the Mongolia could play today in the world? I mentioned Mongolia as such small country in terms of the degree of power and size. But still we have the very strong legacy of being the former empire in our mind. First one, we have seen the role of Mongolia could be the model of democracy in the Asia. The freedom gives the Mongolian people multiple choices to express themselves, to participate in the decision-making at all levels. Despite the claims made by many of the political leaders in the Asia to lay claim that regarding the democracy, the people's democracy, the guided democracy, the Chinese or Russian version of democracy, Asian democracy, we don't care about all of these claims. Also, we think there is no need such any the color kind revolution everywhere, because everything should be the natural and rooted in the need of the people. What we learned from our own experience to build our own democracy and freedom in the countries, the concept like the democracy is the Western value is fancy, it's fallacy. Democracy is the universal values. Therefore, universal wants the universal values. It inherited from everywhere, from the person to person. It might be interpreted in different ways, but there is only the universal root for the democracy and freedom in the world. It is that we learn from our path to the democracy. Also, democracy is the ongoing and living process. It's not just product. We can be different in the interpretation of the substance of the democracy, how to apply to the distinct of the country, how to institutionalize of the democracy in their own country. But most important lesson we learned is universal values. Therefore, we have some distinct views from the other Asian leadership on this interpretation. Also, we know from our experience and support and much needed encouragement which is given us by the United States was the crucial during this painful transition period from the previous system to the market economy. So taking this opportunity, I had to express our most deepest appreciation to the American people for this heartfelt support and much needed encouragement for the Mongolian people. The second role which we see we can play by Mongolia is the Mongolia should be the stabilizing factor between the China and the Russia. Mongolia was under the totalitarian regime over the 70 years. The many Western scholars and analysts define the Mongolia as the part of the former Soviet system. We don't make any complaint about this definition because it was not at all important to distinguish at the time between the reds and the whites, between the socialists and capitalists. But it was vitally important for us to revive the nation. At the beginning of the 20th century, Mongolia was the dying nation, with population only the 500,000 at the time. The majority of the males was at the time the monks, which have no right to marry. Peaceful Buddhist people, not like the previous warriors. Because when Mongolia was surrendered to the Manchurian Empire in the mid of 17th century, we put the three conditions. Still we taste the legacy of these conditions. First condition, we asked Manchurians at the time, if you allow us to manage our internal affairs. Second, if you not allow Han nationalities to settle in our land. Then if you not permit Han nationalities to marry Mongolians, we will accept your terms and to surrender to you. The Manchurians accepted these terms, and the weakened Mongolia became the part of the rising the Manchurian Empire at the time, and was under the Manchurian Empires over the 2 centuries. So during these 2 centuries, the Manchurians introduced the Buddhism into Mongolia, which changed the habit and the mind of the people. Mongolians became from the warriors into the peaceful, friendly nation, not targeted by both the 2 big giants. It's why that we survived. It's why that we preserved our language and border and territory. You know the language is most important value for any distinguished nationals. Therefore, at the time, most important was how to survive. So we survived. Now is the way ahead of us, how to develop us. So despite all of this hidden challenges, we're proud very much established our bilateral relationship with this country, with the United States. So I just would like to focus on the main opportunities which we have seen be the good opportunities for the both of us. First opportunity is education. There are many countries who are looking for the strong relationship with the United States. They're looking for to have some strategic partnership with this country. They're looking for some military and nuclear umbrella from this country. But we are looking for the kind of the education, the strategic ties with the United States. Because Mongolia is the young nation, if you look at the statistics, over the 50% of the population is under the age of 35. Over the 70% of the population is under the age of 16. It's the very young nation. Therefore, education is very important for this nation, because education is the investment in the future. It's the investment in the knowledge-based economy. It's one of the ways to survive between the 2 big civilizations. Therefore, we make the English as our second official language in the country. It's our future target. Now we're trying to learn something from Singapore, how they make the English is second official language. Every month we send a large number of educational delegates to Singapore. The English replaced the Russian at all levels of education systems at the compulsory study. But you will laugh when I will say how we accomplished this task. 16 years ago, the government made a decision to convert all of the Russian language teachers into the English language teachers after 4 weeks course. It was a tough decision, but there is no way. But to make English as the second official language, not to make our people come here as immigrants, but to get some efficient way to join the global community. English is only the way through which we can get all the necessary scientific information for the society. Look at Peace Corps of the United States. The volunteers of the Peace Corps of the United States in Mongolia is one of the highly respected people. The last over the decade, over the 1,000 Peace Corps volunteers saved in Mongolia. So we always about to those young people. You know how harsh the weather conditions we have in the country. What the courage they have, the young American people go to the remote area of Mongolia to teach to our local community English, to help them to build the local community, to teach them get educational. So we asked the U.S. government to increase year by year the number of those volunteers who go to Mongolia. So every year now we got over 100 young people who go to Mongolia as the volunteers of the Peace Corps. They make a huge contribution to the building of the community development, to the building of the young development, and to the building of some healthcare system in the country. We need direct contact between our education systems. The government paying much attention to send as possible that a large number of students to this country. We have the large number of students in the other countries like in Germany, Japan, and Korea. Still we have the few students in the United States, just over 700 students only. We need at least to send up to 10,000 students from the Mongolia to the United States to get more higher education. Because in the 1970s, 80s, we sent up to 10,000 students to the former Soviet Union and East European countries. You can find that German is the second foreign language spoken by the Mongolians after the Russian now. Because at the time we have the very strong ties with former East Germany. A lot of people trained there. But now the English already replaced the Russian, and now there's a second official, the most widely spoken language in the country. The growing demand of the economy also needs such high-valued, well-educated managers. Therefore, the education is the most important strategic ties we have seen with the United States. And second is the tourism. Still, we have a few tourists from the United States and Mongolia, up to the 15 or 16,000. Is that often? I often ask my American friends why there's so few tourists to Mongolia go. They often refer to we have the short vacation. I don't know. You can see in Mongolia the large number of tourists from the West Europe, like France and Germany and Japan and Korea, but very few from the United States. Probably the lack of information is one of the serious barrier to develop tourism between us. Even we made very wise decision to exempted Americans from the visa. The American citizens can visit Mongolia without any visa. And next opportunity could be the private investment from the United States to Mongolia. As I mentioned, Mongolia enjoys now with the private sector-led economic growth. Also, still we have very few foreign direct investment from this country. Despite foreign direct investment in Mongolia is growing, but investment from the United States is very small, almost nothing. There are many reasons to explain to this. Again, the lack of information. Again, the unique geographical location of Mongolia, sandwiched between the two giants. Again, the policy by our neighbors. Therefore, that we are searching the fair neighbor. The United States should be the Mongolia's good, the fair neighbor. Despite we don't have the common boundary, but we should develop the good neighborly relations between us. So private investment would be one of the fundamentals to encourage this kind of the good neighborly policy with Mongolia and with the United States. As I mentioned, now we're trying to change our economic policy from the aid to the trade. For instance, we advocate to establish free trade agreement between Mongolia and the United States. So far that this advocacy is going on well at Capitol Hill, at the administration, at White House. Many people wondering why we need such free trade agreement with such small economy and unknown the country like the Mongolia. But if you look at the Jordan experience, when the Jordan established free trade agreement with the United States and 10 years ago in the mid of 1990s, the trade volume between the United States and Jordan was almost same as today's between the Mongolia and the United States, around 250 million. But today the bilateral trade volume between Jordan and the United States already reached 1.3 billion. Why not Mongolia follow this path? So we can count many advantages having such free trade agreement between us. And then the sense of security guarantee, which is one of the opportunities we are looking for from the United States. As I mentioned, when we talk about sense of security guarantee, we are not talking about military, political, or economic umbrella. We are talking about spiritual and moral authority. Because Mongolia is already declared ourselves nuclear weapon-free zone. We don't need nuclear umbrella from the United States. We don't feel any military threat from any countries. We don't need any military umbrella. When we're talking about sense of the security guarantee, which we're looking for the United States, we are talking about educational opportunity, we are talking about tourism opportunity, we are talking about private investment from this country to Mongolia. So in conclusion, I can say the Mongolian American people share the same value. Mongolia and us are the same democratic nations based on the common strategic interests, like to see the both nations being prosper and stable. Because our bilateral relations based on the high mutual trust. Once we have such high mutual trust, there should be the mutual benefits. I assure all of you, Mongolian people are very friendly toward American people. Very friendly. because we believe that this strong partnership with the United States that finally lead us to the sense of the security guarantee for the small nation like the Mongolia. Therefore, we would like to have the United States being our faith neighbor and guarantee of our survival. Because we believe the good neighborhood is always room of the cooperation and take care of each other with goodwill. Therefore, taking this opportunity, I would like to invite all of these people, all of the audience, all of the Baltimoreans to visit Mongolia to see how we live there, how we're so friendly toward you. So thank you so much for your attention.
Well, we thank you so much for a very complete picture of all facets, I think, of Mongolia today. It's been most interesting, Mr. Ambassador. The question is, what are some of the major health problems in the country?
We enjoy, with relatively good established, widespread the healthcare system in the country. I can count many the favorable statistics how we enjoy with this system. Of course, there is much need to improve the system and to suit the system to the current situation. But because of this, the power, the challenges, this picture also a little bit changed in the last over decade. Most of the poor people now forced to import low quality and the cheaper foods, for instance, from the China. At the same time, some other people enjoy with high quality food which is imported from the West Europe on the daily commercial planes. Still, we have many senior people in the rural area who enjoy with eating only the not raw but meat. To change their mind, to convince them how helpful the vegetarian for them is one of the cultural tasks faced by today, the young people. Therefore, this diet issue, the food issue is kind of the cultural challenge faced by Mongolia today. I would say one of the greatest challenges faced by Mongolia is how to bring the new culture in terms of this diet. We cannot enjoy always with lamb, sheep. For instance, beef considered to be the second-class meat after the after the lamb. So I can count many such examples regarding this diet issue. But let me just finish. It's the cultural issue in the Mongolia. It's a very serious issue too.
Have you felt economic and political pressure from Russia? Please describe that discreetly. And comment on how you may have avoided it, if you will.
Yes, Mongolia enjoyed with long time our partnership in the alliance policy with the former Soviet Union. At the time, nobody predicted that such a huge empire will be disintegrated within such short time. It was kind of shock for us at the time. When the Soviets withdrawn from the Mongolia, they cut off all of the grant and assistance to Mongolia, which was equal to almost over 30% of the Mongolian GDP. It was painful at the time. And since this time, our bilateral relationship with newly formulated Russian Federation was in some kind of the stagnant. There was the big issue between us. We called this as the big debt issue, because the Russian government requested Mongolia to pay of the big debt which they called inherited from the former Soviet Union to the Mongolia, over the $11 billion big debt. Because of this issue, the bilateral relations was somehow in the stagnant, and we talked many times to the Russian Federation to find some efficient way to solve the issue. So we can not find some ways during the President Yeltsin time. When Mr. Putin was elected as president of Russia, we had some new way to solve this issue. It's why so far the Mongolia appreciate very much for the President Putin and the Russian leadership to solve this issue, because it was the current issue on the part of Russia just to cancel out up to the 98% of all of this debt, and we just paid up the rest of the debt, around $250 million. After this solved issue, the bilateral relations between the Mongolia and Russia just getting more prosper and getting to expand and open the new chapters. And now we're trying to find to open the new chapter of the relationship between the Mongolia and the United States. Therefore, we cannot feel any economic or other pressure on the part of the Russia and the Mongolia, because we are the good neighborhoods. There is no way just to please each other. We know there are the great potential for us to develop business-like type relations between us. Mongolia is the gateway to reach the Russian forest market for the foreign investors. So now we are trying now to expand our economic relationship with the Russian forest and with Russia.
I think it's been an extraordinarily interesting evening, Mr. Ambassador. You've more than informed us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.